Welcome to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Minahan and her panel of guests bring you insightful conversations to awaken consciousness for soul growth. Come journey with us through astrology's energetic cycles and get ready to understand your path in the cosmic roots of the stars.
Hello again. I'm Sue Minahan. This is Talk Cosmos, and today we are addressing once again our panel that focuses on the mundane, we could say, and leveling at the United States, because we're in a 50-and-a-half-year cycle that's culminating with the wounded healer to alchemize how we can be better. Chiron. And for us, there's three focuses because we've had several. This is like the fifth one we're experiencing, and we'll get into all of that. So stay tuned. We're now ready for U.S. Global Currents, an astrological perspective.
Examining significant United States domestic politics and foreign affairs through the astrological perspective of the celestial map of the sky to understand the impact on each individual around the globe, this is your U.S. Global Currents panel.
I'm Sue Minahan, founder of Talk Cosmos since 2018. I'm an evolutionary astrologer, consultant, speaker, writer, vibrational astrology student, Dwarf Planet University graduate, Kepler Astrology Toastmasters Club charter member. I have a fine arts music degree plus a certificate in jazz. I'm an artist, musician, and certified color energy life coach. Especially, I love mythology and esoteric philosophies.
I'm Robert Pezzetti, professional consulting astrologer and the visionary behind Deep Earth Astrology and the Deep Earth Astrology Tarot, a divination tool and teaching aid that integrates astrology, herbalism, and natural reverence. I specialize in vibrational and psychological techniques and infuse my practice with a deep connection to nature's spirituality. I'm currently the Grand Pendragon in the Ancient Order of Druids in America and the director of the Magus Gathering in Gore, Virginia.
I'm Justin Crockedelzy, an archetypal Jyotish astrologer, yoga and meditation teacher, and author. I combine both Western ancient astrology and modern psychological astrology with Eastern Vedic astrology, and I specialize in predictive, electional, and karmic astrology for individuals and couples. I also do in-depth astrological research into arcane astrological concepts, focusing on the mystical, occult side of astrology.
Rock musician Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention says,
"A mind is like a parachute. It doesn't work if it's not open."
Hi, Justin, and hi, Rob. Great to have you.
Hello.
Hey.
Here we are involving the USA dynamic energy. So let's just start in and see, where is this nation headed? What's up now? If we can get those up. They're up. Okay. We have Justin Crockedelzy at his site and Rob Pezzetti at Deep Earth Astrology. Chiron, this is a little bit of a review. There have been three. The first one was last April. We'll talk about briefly that factor, and also again in November on the 8th. But it is a 50-and-a-half closed cycle. Amazingly, it crosses Saturn, which is not quite personal, but it's still a very regulated pattern, with the break it out of the box Uranus. So it's bridging these two dynamics. The mythology of Chiron is essential. Rejected at birth, half horse, half human, not really liked back then. It was considered a beast, out of the norm, and recognizing that, of course, integrating the nature with our humanity has been an ongoing factor in civilization. So he was, though, ruled or guided, you could say, by the sun and the moon. So he had definite lineage. And we might think of that too, that despite whatever it is that's in our chart that's of a wound. And in Aries, it's going to be self. That's what we're focused on for the United States, that is, that there's recruits, there's support, the sun and the moon. But it's called a centaur, and he was a master. He was taught by the sun and the moon all the arts in every form, and he taught in mythology and, well, you never know the difference between mythology and not, but all the greats of medicine and on. And this is not about teaching the mythology, but to give you a little bit of a snapshot why this has such magnitude. Why do we even care about Chiron, this small entity, object that's orbiting our space? But it is, as I say, between Saturn and Uranus. End of the story was that one of his students, Hercules, came to visit. They had a party. Pholus, the other centaur, was carrying the wine that was his job. But opening it, the rest of the centaurs who were not, there's a distinction. And I need to limit myself here. But the fact is, there was a big riot. Arrows flying. Hercules had been on his 12 labors. Arrows dipped in the poison of the Hydra, no cure, and he got shot. Wound would not heal. We carry this somehow within us, and it's part of our growth period is to alchemize it. Things don't go away, but we can use it, like maybe metal getting forged to get stronger. He gave up his life. That is the bottom line of this story, because another mythology of Prometheus, who gave spirit, fire to humanity, unasked for by Zeus, was being punished. And Chiron gave up his mortality. It was the only way. He was a demigod and couldn't die, but he died for Prometheus.
I think one of the most interesting things about Chiron, especially in this capacity, is that 2025 is the year of the ingress. We have all of these outer planets, including Jupiter and Saturn, moving to these new signs, and for Chiron to be leading the charge in all of this change is certainly going to be a time when we have to, kind of find ourselves and understand how our wound as a nation operates.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, no, I just to kind of summarize, I think what Sue was saying was that it's every 50 years. It takes Chiron 50 years to go around the sun, and so that the United States has had several of these Chiron returns, every 50 years. And no, I would agree. I think this is when we look at the current situation in the United States. And any country, when they have a Chiron return from mundane astrology perspective, it really represents the wound of the nation. And there's a lot of how you want to say, tension and chaos and revisiting old wounds that a nation has created.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very excellent, because of the fact that Aries in itself represents the archetype of selfhood. And essentially, it's like, do I even belong? I mean, is it okay to be me? So here with the Constitution, that we're the people, do you belong? And Justin discovered in our first presentation back in April of 2024, that was April 20th, 3 themes. One is, who belongs to be an American? Still in that period of struggle, trying to correct this wound is a focus. And also firsts, because Aries is firsts. So there's national firsts, cultural. And last, the leadership, considering that Aries by its very nature steps away from the whole and encounters new identity and becoming. So presidential issues.
And I want to say something about these 3. So if we go back to every time the United States had a Chiron return, consistently, no, if you go back to that screen you're just at there, yeah, No, the prior one where that listed the themes. Sue.
Okay. Gotcha. Keep going. Sorry.
There. Yeah. Consistently, every time there's been a Chiron return, every one of these things has been triggered. So, like, who belongs? And so, if you look back in history, every time a Chiron return has happened, there's been some major war or major, what I want to say, not contracts, but major agreements made with certain, like the Native Americans or Asians or nationalities in the United States. There's always been some issue coming up there. Of course, we see that now with the immigration and that. And then there's some constant struggle with culture and philosophy. And if you go back to those times, every 50 years, there was some major. If you could go back to the
I know, but I want people to see the years. It's 1825. It's 1874 before the revolution. So and it's also 1923, just during the height of the heyday, before it crashed, and after the war, and 1973. So that's all. I just want people to kind of focus.
If you could go back to the prior slide, I want to highlight that. So there's always a constant cultural thing too, and we see significant changes in culture at these times. So something to think about now, that we've got cultural issues coming up now, like trans folks, and there's a struggle with that in the side, and then presidential issues. Every time there's been a Chiron return, there's either a president who's died, or there's been an assassinated attempt or a contested election, and it just so happens during this Chiron return, we've had all of those things happen. Contested election, death of a president, and an assassination attempt. So I just want to point out that these themes consistently really kind of go to the basis of that Chiron.
Absolutely.
Aries.
And if you look, yes, exactly. It's very fundamental. I mean, look at Bitcoin coin we're having, and et cetera, et cetera. And essentially who belongs is just monumental. Did you have a thought there, Rob, to add to our?
Well, yeah. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, and especially with this kind of this precession that we have of planets in Pisces and Aries crossing that 0 world point. I mean, this is going to be a foundational change in the complete cycle and psyche of the United States, especially with Neptune moving into Aries as well. I mean, just as Justin was talking about the history of how Chiron works. I mean, Neptune has always been about moving into Aries in the nation has been about corruption. It's a Liz Green talked about that, about anytime we're mixing those Mars energies with Neptune energies, we're going to see that corruption, and having that wound exposed in a time of corruption. And that doesn't necessarily, it's not a political statement. I mean, I would believe that anybody would feel that the other side of their own beliefs are corrupt. And that seems to be a theme right now.
Yeah.
Everything eventually needs to get pruned in some way. How you're going to prune it, whether it's just, is a basis. And I flipped around with the charts because there was the very first one last April. And I'll just go back to that just briefly to bring people up to focus. But that was on, nope, that's the second one, darn it. Because they do carry a theme. The first one, this is 20 degrees, 8 minutes of Aries. It's in our 4th house natally in this country. And the first was on April 20th. That happened, and this is for the podcast people, 11:14 a.m. Eastern time. Jupiter conjunct Uranus, an outer orbit, which is monumental. And we'll see that Jupiter also conjunct Chiron a couple years back, and we're in that cycle. Justin brought that up.
And then what did we just talk about? Look what's happening there. Mars and Neptune, the beginning, there's a feeling of corruption. And, that when we're talking about this specific aspect pattern here, this is, this would be called a soft opposition due to the fact that it's getting a little bit of relief from the trine and the sextile.
Yes.
But, we weren't really into the full swing of what this meant at this point. There were still we're talking about the conjunction between the Taurus, Jupiter, and Uranus. That can be radical feelings of abundance. That can be, it was still ramping up at this point, that waveform.
Very good. And it's true. We were releasing some of our structures there, but you're right. That's an excellent point, that this strong conjunction, Jupiter and Uranus, were mitigating. So the second one happened to be 3 days after the election on November 8th. And that was at 3:54 a.m. Eastern time. And the important part is really about Mars here. Mars transiting was approaching our North Node that at 6 degrees Leo, and that was the retrograde point. So we're still in this whole dynamic of the which is every 2 years when it retrogrades, and it's a whole path of 7 months. And of course, Mars has been out of bounds, meaning that Martian energy is answering to its own archetype. It has its own focus of what it needs to do. And in addition, Jupiter, the expansion that makes everything bigger, was transiting exactly on our natal Mars.
Yeah, and it's all right there in the things that you have circled. I mean, you have the Mars North Node there. I mean, energy towards that corrupt energy, it being kind of part of our destiny right now. The moon representing the more vulnerable people, as something being a part of the past. And then obviously you have the Mars Jupiter in Gemini, being about, especially in Gemini, that double-sided communication, being exploded to this nth degree, whereas now where we saw that the seeds of that being formed in the first in the first part of the cycle, now we're starting to see that expansion and how we tie it to our national destiny.
And Folis, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think that you point out something. I think it's kind of important to look at all of this is this whole Jupiter transit through these signs, because again, having a major Jupiter Chiron conjunction in my natal chart, I understand the whole aspect of how Jupiter inflates. And it cannot necessarily always be good, even though it's the planet of good fortune. It can inflate things that kind of go the opposite direction. And so I think, Rob, you're pointing out that Mars Jupiter conjunction in Gemini is huge, because that was just inflating the whole communications of miscommunication, misinformation, and lies. And it was over the top with that, right?
It's so true. We were approaching the retrograde. We were in the first path, but we've been experiencing, which will be in a few days, it'll finally go direct. But it's been a huge reset time in so many ways, reevaluating, but we didn't understand. And the nodes were different, on and on, of our focus, in other words, instead of relationships, many changes. And look at Folis there. I'm so impressed. Is it 6 degrees exactly of cutting the past of our, something about our South Node in Aquarius, of what we consider to be elevating and what we consider to be our community, and what's stepping in our way, or else what's going to get cut.
And if I might say one other thing, I know we didn't put it on any of the slides, but I know everybody's been talking about the Pluto return, but I think what's bigger than what that Pluto return is Pluto hitting the South Node. That's like an ending and restart. I mean, it's just as powerful as the Pluto return is Pluto on the South Node. And in the second house of values, that gets to what you're going to talk about a little bit later here, is that was Venus, the values, evaluation of values.
And that is such an excellent point, because if you go back to 1776 until 1781, when it actually stopped, and then 83 when the Treaty of Paris came in and said, okay, guys, got to get out of those two cities. War's over. Pluto was at the very beginning of especially the first 3 degrees, just like it is now, toggling, but it goes up to about 6 when it ends. I have to go and check that. So we're really in the midst of it. That's an excellent fact. Well, here we are at the third one coming up on the 18th of February. Today is just a few days away. And actually, today's 16th and the 18th, depending on where it's shown. So we have.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
I mean,
Rob.
right about, having the, the where the Mercury is, where the Uranus is. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious where this is going, especially in the third house. I mean, in Pisces, Mercury in Pisces is not effective in its mission, at least. It's clouding. It can be creative, but it can also be deceptive. It's confusing. It can be diluting. And you could talk more about that conjunction there. I mean, that as far as like the harvest, the abundance, things like that, in the world, reaping what we've sowed, is
Right.
seems to be a major theme there as far as our communication. And then, Jupiter on top of Uranus. I mean, it's just another part of that Jupiter cycle that you were talking about, where we had it on the Mars, which was, and now I think we're going to be seeing more and more and more interruption. And the how that interruption can be expanded. We're let's be honest. I mean, there's so much duality out there right now. I mean, as far as messaging, and I think that's what this really talks about.
Right.
Yes.
Well, and I agree with you, and I really think the kind of the important thing here is this whole Mars Jupiter thing going on, especially through these signs between Aries, Taurus, Gemini, and Cancer. And Cancer being that it rules the lineage, the family, the tribe, and the fact that in this third Chiron pass here, Mars is on the U.S. sun, right, retrograding. So again, it's questioning, okay, who's not a part of the family here, right? Mars retrograding in Cancer, kick them out. That's getting rid of the part of the family. But what happens is, I think that it's important to look at where we're at now, and as soon as Jupiter because it's about ready to move into Cancer, gets to that point where Mars is right now squaring the U.S. Chiron. Well, coming up this year, Jupiter is going to be at that point and square. It's going to be at that same degree in Cancer, where Mars is starting something now and will probably be inflated or magnified when Jupiter gets up to that Cancer point squaring the U.S. Chiron. I'm just saying that's looking forward, that I think this Mars is telling us something here with that. What do you think about that?
Absolutely agree. And, that energy happening when we're having all of these ingresses, in 2025, because the thing about the people need to understand about the 2025 ingresses is that these, especially these outer planets, are going to be retrograding and going through their shadow periods for most of 2025. We're not really going to see the total effects of this until 2026, especially when we get to that, that Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So I think that we're going to be in this kind of weird holding pattern for a while, where everything from from more of the what we would call the diurnal qualities, the air and the fire qualities, are just getting ramped up and ramped up. The air is feeding the fire, the air is feeding the fire. And then once we get to that 2026, I mean, what happens when a lot of air meets a lot of fire at one time? I mean,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
And really looking back at that square with Mercury on Ceres, which again is food, it's grief. We're trying to nurture ourselves, but really, if you look at the archetype, it is grief. There's a lot of loss with Ceres. She lost her daughter. She lost the food. She didn't produce the food. It's goes forward, but it's squaring that Jupiter and Uranus. So yes, the magnitude of sudden change happening. Go ahead, Justin.
Well, I'm just curious. I think Rob just picked up on what you just said too, because when we talk about what's going on right now with farmers, I think you're picking up on that, weren't you, Rob? Like there's these farmers now realizing that they're getting screwed because this program has been pulled back from them, and Ceres represents food. Yeah. I mean, what do you think about that, Rob?
One of the memes that's going around right now, and it's factual, is the price of eggs. And, it's funny. It's funny that has been kind of the messaging that's going on, because, it's been that kind of Gemini, meme worthy. Oh, well, you said you were going to lower the price of eggs. Oh, well, the price of eggs are skyrocketing. I
love it.
It's been weaponized. It's been weaponized.
Well, I will explain. It's kind of like, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? And really, when you consider the little chicken, this lowly little thing, just like we had the virus that crashed out the whole world, we have the chicken that every day people want on their little breakfast plate. Like if you had anything that was going to regularly talk to people about, is it happening? Is it not happening? What's happening?
And you also have you have the Pallas Athena on top of the Ceres there in the chart as well. I mean, coming up with a strategy for abundance during a time when we have bird flu coming through the nation.
Yeah. And I should say I'm not in love with it. I just love the irony of it. It's a great example.
And, like the clouded message around it is very much the conjunction between the Pisces Mercury and the Ceres with the Pisces as well.
Yeah, I think we should definitely continue to watch Ceres because of all this stuff happening with our food system now. Immigrants being kicked out is going to bring up the price of foods because people are not there to pick it. And at Ceres being that whole aspect of farmers and food, and what we're going to talk about later, Rob, which you brought up about the medicine and that, I definitely think Ceres is going to play a role. We got to see what is going to happen with Ceres.
Yes. And reminding folk, and we'll take a little break here, but back in 2020, on January 12th, when Saturn and Pluto were conjunct, Ceres was right there with them. And that's been brought up again and again. So she's part of that whole cycle of... Okay, we'll be back. Get your chow. We'll be returning. Thank you so much, everybody. While we take a break from this week's edition of Talk Cosmos, let's take a look at this cycle's archetype. We are currently in the Yang period of Aquarius, ruled modernly by Uranus, and Saturn in traditional astrology by the ancients. By leaving a cycle based on governing structures through both man-made and universal laws, Aquarius breaks established patterns, permitting the energy of freedom, just as its ruling planet Uranus spins on its side and orbits backwards. As a fixed air sign represented by the water bearer pouring the spirit of cosmic energy, Aquarius seeks to find like-minded, intuitively aligned souls to connect in social groups for the elevation and improvement of all.
Talk Cosmos brings insightful conversations to awaken consciousness for the soul growth with hour-long programs. Talk Cosmos weekly programs are also available to watch live on the Talk Cosmos YouTube channel and Facebook page. While you're there, make sure you click the like and subscribe buttons so you get the full Talk Cosmos experience. Or if you'd rather listen to the show archives with audio only, the entire podcast collection since 2018 is available on most podcast carriers. And to find out about upcoming programs, sign up for the newsletter at talkcosmos.com. So grab your coffee, tea, or kombucha and enjoy the show.
This is Martha Norwalk. Every Sunday morning, beginning at 9 a.m., thanks in part to newprosupplements.com, we cover the world of animals. This week, February 23rd, it's an encore presentation. Join us to hear our last healing show with Dr. Nils Rasmussen and Sister Linda Rasmussen. Together, they helped callers and their animal friends with emotional, behavioral, and physical issues, and you can receive a surrogate healing just by listening and following along with Linda's instructions. Martha Norwalk's Animal World, Sunday morning, 9 a.m. to noon, right here on Alternative Talk, AM 1150.
Exploring new territory every day. This is Alternative Talk 1150.
Okay, hello everybody. Hello Justin. Hello Rob. And yes, what do we have here? I think it went to the next one. So we're looking at the USA chart, independence chart, and on the outside we're seeing Venus transiting. Oh, just a quick mention, because chronologically, as we're going from the 18th with that Chiron return, coming up in March is going to be a Venus star point. That's a whole cycle, 5, but it's a sensitive point. And it has to do, of course, with the values and that of Aries, because it is in Aries, the heart values. And the fact is that just hours before its occurrence, which will be on the 22nd, it squares our natal Venus. And why is that important? Because it's a sensitive point. It stays there at the head of this 5-pointed star with a head and 2 arms and 2 legs. Might be abstract for some people, and other people know exactly what I'm talking about. And it has a relationship, and it can be added to your chart, and it's going to be a sensitive chart, meaning when it gets triggered, things occur. It's a 100-year cycle. It's phasing out. But this happens to be a degree that was with the United States in 1776, because the whole Venus cycle is a 250-year cycle, a lot like Pluto, meaning that's why I brought this up. And not only is it evident for 9 months as exchanging and receiving direction from either Gemini or Scorpio at those Venus star points, but it will last as a point as it rotates around the 5 points as new ones come along for 4 years at that degree. We're still going to have Aries for about another 8, 10, 12 years, but at 2 degrees. So this is meaning we have a chance here throughout all of this to really evaluate and reassess, as squares do, act with our values. That's my big point for bringing it up.
I think I got to tell you, I'm curious what Rob thinks about this too, but I think that's huge. I think it's really what the whole, like one of the basic foundations here is about evaluation of values, through this period.
I also, I agree. And I think that this is kind of the next chapter. If I was going to put a chapter point in a book, this would be the beginning of another chapter. And the reason why is, we see Mars squaring that Chiron there, receiving that, the Aries energy there. But look at also what's going on between Neptune and the Sun. I mean, we have Neptune at its anaretic degree at 29 degrees, kind of confusing things. And, this is a good example of, just because a planet is in a domicile doesn't mean that it's a good thing. It just means it's effective there, whereas the Sun is in a place where it wants to strike out. It's the spring equinox. It wants to be renewed. It's still carrying the confusion of the times, and also with that Chiron square Mars, we're definitely going to be getting that the wound is feeding the community. The wound is feeding the family. So, and I mean, I'd like to hear what your interpretation of, obviously we're at a Ceres return there. How do you think that that's going to affect things, Justin?
Well, I think, it's going to be disruption. That's what I think. And I think that's what we're dealing with I think part of this is going to be like to what Sue bringing up here, this whole concept of values. There's going to be something about value in relation to our food sources and health with Ceres.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, we have we're a little bit off center. We'll go right through this. This is our halftime. But Rob Pissetti, just to remind people, is at deepearthastrology.com. You can get a hold of him there. And Justin Crockett Elsie has his website. And he also has, as you will see, another site right here, Astrological Yogi with Blue Sky, and also Astrological Yogi now with YouTube. So do connect with our folks. And I think you wanted to mention, Rob, about the
Yes, we're ready to announce
vibrational.
the Vibrational Astrology Conference. It's called Fractal Cosmos. It will be August 29th through the 31st over Labor Day weekend. We have, David Cochran will be there, Linda Berry. We're going to be doing a lot of fascinating presentations. There's two tracks, one for people who are completely new to vibrational astrology and one for more advanced researchers. You can go to fractalcosmos.org for more information and get on our mailing list, and we will be, getting registration going. Registration will be opening on March 9th.
I will start promoting that. Excellent.
And where's that going to be at, Rob?
This is a fully online conference for this year. Our plan is to do it online for a year or two, and then move it to a live event. This is only vibrational astrology.
Yeah, and it's with the two really instigators.
Yes.
David began this, and Linda Berry is a mega researcher. I know both Rob and I are students of hers, and it's just illuminating. It's like, it's incredible. Good. Well, just for myself, I am part of a podcast with Astrology Star Sisters with Elizabeth Liz Mouchette. And there was a new one about Uranus-Jupiter conjunction. Is that Uranus Jupiter? No, that's not right. She doesn't have that right. At any rate, it's going. I have it wrong. The fact is, it was about Uranus and Gemini. But check out the playlist. It's at my YouTube channel, and we have different programs. Of course, you can find that on YouTube, and it's a bunch of different features. And next week will be about the new moon in Pisces with archetypal symbols. And my good friend and fellow guest on Astrojam, which is coming up also in March, has if you want to journey for your healing, she has a retreat. It's online. It's a journey to inner healing and wholeness. There's an early bird price until the end of March. So do look at that. And that's virtual. Actually, if you go to, it's Marie O'Neill with Padma Life Coaching that is curating this. And you can go to virtual retreat, caring for the soul, evanbright.com. A little bit lengthy, but it's right there. You can look back for that. So thank you, everybody, for subscribing and liking. We're growing, and I really am grateful. Let's leap back in. We have Jupiter conjunct Chiron, 2023, the beginning of a 13-year cycle. Justin?
No, go ahead, Rob. I think you brought up this. This was your idea, and I think I liked some of the things you were saying about it. What is your take on that?
Well, I mean, I think that we're going to just see this as a big ramp up period for what's going on with the retrograde and the shadow periods with these outer planets. I mean, we're going to see. I don't know how we're going to resolve this without kind of dealing with this fact here. I mean, if you also look at, I think another thing there is that, once we get further along in these charts right now, we see that conjunction between Pluto and Hygeia. I think Hygeia is a big theme for the people that are in charge right now. We noticed that last broadcast about that concept of national purity and that concept of what our perception of a healthy nation looks like. And I really do feel like that is the impetus of a lot of the issues that we're having now, is the framework in which we're operating. So you can go to the next slide. I just wanted to
I love it.
I do want to say something on that. I'm glad you brought up Hygeia, because I did a whole show on this. Every 7 years, Hygeia and Chiron conjunct. So it's actually, as you're talking about the Hygeia, the purity, and that just actually happened in last year. Was we had that Hygeia Chiron conjunction for the United States, and so I think we can look out 13 years from now, because we start this new Jupiter conjunction Chiron, which takes us to 2036. But also we should pay attention to 7 years from now, when the next what sign the next Chiron and Hygeia conjunction will happen in.
Yeah.
This is so beautiful. It dovetails everything. It brings in our values. It brings in our actions. It brings in our healing. Brings in like, what are we? Well, then we'll move on. And most interestingly, just to bring focus to that was brought up through our dialogue here with Justin and Rob, that these specific Chiron conjunctions are with synergy. A week before we had our USA return, which is every 2 years, but still it was very close. So in other words, it is really being motivated to focus on looking forward, because we have a lot to cover. But here we are in current times with the Department of Education, one of the chopping board, and it was May 4th, 1980 and I think I have this time right, Justin, if I have it, was 12:56 a.m. Happened to be a Sunday, and that's Eastern time.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the conjunction between Hygeia and Mercury and Taurus there, that is very much about, giving resources to education for kind of a holistic purity to how we approach education. And then you have, in the same house as you have that Chiron Jupiter conjunction, which is a big expansion of a wound. Okay, it's like a wound opening to a great level, especially striking out for the
and in
individual.
Taurus.
Yeah, and the big push is
The body.
they want to turn education into something that is fully controlled by the individual. With the
don't we have mentors usually? I thought there were usually mentors with education.
They're talking a lot about vouchers. They're talking a lot about homeschooling. They're talking taking things away from a public education standpoint, and then moving into where they have more control over exactly what is being taught. That is a direct conflict there. I mean,
well, and Taurus rules values or possessions and money, right? Taurus rules money and resources. So here we have the wound with resources and how those resources, we saw the freezing of funds, and funds are going to be taken away. So that's part of the Hygeia in Taurus, I believe. And just for the audience, the reason why we're looking at the Department of Education is because Jupiter is the guru. It represents education, learning, and so that's why I wanted to kind of go back and preface why we were looking at Department of Education, especially there's so much stuff being thrown at the wall.
It's really beautiful because they're both centaurs, and there's a wonderful article that people might look at that's in Astrodienst. And it's by Brian Clark of Australia, who has all kinds of notable references and written many, many, many books. And it's about Jupiter Chiron and the distinctions in a sense of what one lends to the other. And of course, Jupiter is more perhaps what we see as far as not traditional, but Chiron is very much knowing, the knowing of the wise of the nature. So
yeah, and I mean, listen, we're basing a lot of this around the Jupiter Chiron conjunction in Aries, and that is the reopening of a wound. It's kind of the it's going to be worse than it was, and that's really what it comes down to, and this chart here with the Department of Health, obviously a lot of questions about that. I would say, just being from a completely neutral standpoint, that RFK Jr. being appointed to that is probably the one that has the most kind of like people are on the fence about it, because there is an acknowledgement that our health is not, our approach to healthcare as a nation is not good. Okay, I think everybody can universally agree with that.
Could be more holistic, more alternative. Yes.
And they're doing some things like, removing dyes that the European nations have already removed, so this is, I think, the one where people are kind of most, let's see what happens about. And you see that in the chart, especially in the seventh house with the seventh house, is kind of our close relationships with our allies. from a mundane standpoint, and this is where I think you're going to see a lot of changes here. Novo Nordisk is a massive pharmaceutical company. We're trying to take Greenland from them right now. They're saying we're going to cut off your pharmaceuticals. There's a lot of activity going around about how we're going to be approaching health, mental health. He just announced that they want to reduce the amount of prescriptions that we give for SSRIs, which are for depression and anxiety,
serotonin and all that stuff that really makes a distinctive difference with PTSD. And I'm sorry, but I must say that our veterans have experienced their they need to be supported.
And something that jumps out this chart with me, 2 points. Okay. Back to this whole point of RFK Jr. taking over. Now, there is this, he was asked, because he has this label as a conspiracy theorist, which has a little bit of a relationship to Pisces here. And I think it's very important as we look at the 6th house here, is that that's where the Pisces is at. The Neptune in Pisces, Sun in Pisces, Mercury in Pisces, all going through there. So there is sort of this kind of conspiracies coming in about vaccines and everything else, with this kind of escapism with the Piscean archetype there. But I also see, like you're bringing up, Rob, about this change of money and how this is going to be with Uranus on Jupiter there, Jupiter and Mars. That's a big conjunction, Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Taurus there. That means that that's basically going to change the foundation of where all this money and resources and funds are going to go to. I think it's going to be a reorganization around the board. And that may be, a lot with the money with the to the hospitals, but also, like you're talking about Norvodisk and some other pharmaceuticals coming in here. I think that's kind of big, the Uranus Jupiter conjunction there.
And look at the 6th house. I mean, the 6th house is rules health, the national health. And, you have Neptune conjunct the moon. I mean, that is chronic health issues. You know what I mean? Coming to
mental health. Health.
Yes, and a new moon, essentially a new moon in itself, because 25 degrees Pisces for the moon and 21 for the sun. So it's like a crescent moon.
Whether it's dealing with people's mental health or the new secretary has a mental health issue, one way or another, mental health is going to play out here, right?
It's a focus, and it's a Mercury return. And I'm looking too, what's really amazing is that we do have a time for the USA Department of Health, April 11th, 1953 at 5:32 p.m. Eastern Time. And therefore, we have an 8-degree ascendant. That's partly for the podcast, but meaning that the bulk of this is on the western side, meaning it's very exposed. So I'm hoping there's more of a dialogue with the public and everybody about this, on how to, especially if they're restricting certain support that people need, that we'll find out.
Well, I think too also, and I'd be curious what you two think about this, but that Mars conjuncting Ceres in Gemini.
Exactly. There you go with Ceres again. And it's in Gemini. So meaning duality of, boy, we're feeling everything. It's in our philosophy. It's in the 9th house of our belief systems. Like, which way are we going? Are we being nurtured? Are we nurturing? Are we being lost, abandoned, rejected?
And I think that also means there'll be a lot of stuff that goes into the courts, being 9th house.
Yes, thank you.
And we touched on this before as being a very sensitive point, but we're talking about a Neptune-Saturn conjunction, and look what we got. On the inside of the chart there in the 1st house. I mean, that is definitely going to be another kind of, flashpoint for restriction.
That's true.
That was health.
This is very good, though, in many ways, because that was 52, 53 around that time was a signature point I have a sister with that signature point, so I'm really conscious of it. And it did conjunct, but according to vibrational astrology with Linda Barry, Rob, it's where you bring the fundamental core energies of Saturn with the magical visionary attraction that Pisces has to have in life. And what do you get out of that? But spirit. So
Yeah, I certainly
I
could see.
hope we-
I could certainly see that, but I could also see that very much being as a snake oil salesman.
Oh,
You
the
know,
good, the bad, both.
the good, bad, and the ugly. So I mean, there is
I
a
follow.
multivalent way. Yeah.
Okay. Well, here we get to two last charts, and we have enough time, which is just great. The first one is going to be our Sibley chart, which is of the various independence ones. That's pretty mainstream. It's on July 4th, 1776. That's our Independence Day. The war went on until 1781 and finalized, and many, many things happened later. Our Constitution wasn't until 89. But in July 4th, it was 5:10 p.m. Philadelphia. And on the outside is a progressed chart. That's a day for every year of Donald Trump's chart.
I mean, for me, the whole thing comes down to the ninth house with that. It's almost direct conjunction between Hygeia and Mercury in Leo.
Yes.
That is, the mental focus is on his view of what the national purity needs to be. Setting that, the ninth house is, higher learning, higher thought, bringing that into the national spirit of things. It's also the courts in the ninth house in mundane, like taking that attitude of this is my decision on what is best for the nation. He just put out a tweet yesterday that essentially said, I'm paraphrasing here, but essentially the message was, you cannot break the law if you're changing the country for good.
Yeah. And, can I also point out really quickly that that's actually, though, Hygeia. So that's like, there's some issue here with ego and arrogance and the health of those communications. But you know what I think is the other important one, Sue and Rob, is the exact conjunction of Uranus with Mars.
Yeah.
That is like...
firecrackers.
Right. This is the person that changes the conversation. Whether we like it or not, this is a person that changes the conversation and throws a bunch of gooby gloop in there, and it's just like all over the map, and it's...
And action's immediate right now.
It's chaos of communications and information.
What you see is what we're working on right now.
And the seventh house is our close allies.
Yeah.
I mean, look at what's going on with Canada. Look at what's going on with Europe. We're literally our vice president is giving speeches to the far right in Germany right now. I mean, really kind of speaking out of both sides of the mouth. And that is really,
well, look at his Chiron. His Chiron is in Libra on Saturn in June, close to Saturn.
Yeah. We'll look at that. Before we do, may I say that particular conjunction with transiting Mars, not transiting Mars, but his progressed Uranus conjunct the natal Mars is in a T-square because it's squaring his... No, wait, it's not. Oh, it's not. Okay, I'm trying to look at that because see his natal Chiron, progressed Chiron is at 20 degrees, but okay, forget that. It's more in a point of Thales, but
the
point
Mars are trining. The Mars are trining, Liz.
They are, and Sue. It's all right.
Sue.
Yeah. And Chiron is opposing Chiron. That was my other thought. The progressed Chiron is opposing our natal Chiron. So the healing fractures, fractions. I'm thinking convergence fractions here with the VA, but I guess we have to split it apart like Gemini, gather all the pieces in order to assemble them and discern what's going to work.
We got 2 minutes left, so I'd like to go to that last chart because I think
all right. Donald Trump, June 14th, 1946 at 9:51 a.m. Eastern Time, Jamaica, and Elon Musk, June 28th, 1971 at 7:30 a.m. Pretoria, South Africa.
I like how you put vice president there. He's not actually the vice president, but talk about a Freudian. That pretty much.
That's a Freudian slip. Yeah.
You covered everything about this chart just by putting that. All right. We only have a minute left, but I think the similarities between these two charts are speaking for themselves. They might be two very different people, but they operate in a very similar energetic.
It is. They have Mercury conjunct Mercury. That's right above Chiron. They have their Venus and Uranus conjunct in either way. Their Mars are opposing. Justin?
Yeah, different direction at some point.
Yes,
Mars.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. It'll be interesting.
Maybe
He's not the
VP. South Node on the Pluto.
I know. I kept thinking about that book about Elf G or whatever it is. Then I realized, wrong person. But everybody, blessings to you. May you heal bountifully. And thank you.
Thank you for joining an insightful conversation on Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Minahan and her panel of guests awaken consciousness by connecting soul growth patterns with astrology's energetic cycles. Be sure to tune in next week, same time, same place, to continue your journey through the roots of the cosmic pathway.